Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. I've got a quick question for you all listening today. Do we have any startup founders listening out there? Or any business leaders? If we do, man, do I have a treat for you, because I've got Peter Yared coming onto the podcast today. And for those of you that don't know, he is a 7 times founder with more than 500 million in exits. And he's going to join me today to share his insights on how to stay afloat during these uncertain times, all based on his experience starting and selling 6 successful startups. And of course, he is currently CEO and founder of InCountry, which is the world's first Data Residency-as-a-Service platform. And we're going to talk about all that, as well as the realities of running a startup during a recession, what CEOs and founders need to do now and what kind of things can wait, and also the new way of digital business, especially as a result of the lockdown period. But enough from me. Buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to California so we can speak with Peter about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, hi, I'm Peter Yared. I'm the founder and CEO at a company called InCountry. At InCountry, we are a global data compliance and storage solution. So we're live in 90 countries. And we help companies store data compliantly in each of those countries, so for global companies. And my background is in infrastructure software, and I've been lucky to have started 6 different companies that were acquired by a variety of large enterprises, such as Sun Microsystems, VMware, and Citrix. And then I also, for 3 years, was at CBS, the TV network in the United States, as the CIO of the digital group, bringing them into the cloud.
Wow, 6 companies. And we will have a lot of startup founders listening at various stages of their startup journey. So I've got to ask, as the founder who has sold 6 enterprise infrastructure companies, former CTO, CIO, CBSI, can you remember the inspiration behind the passion for technology and entrepreneurship and where that came from and what put you on this path?
Yeah, when I was 9 years old, this was 1979. I was lucky enough to run into an Apple II computer and just fell in love with computers back then and programmed them all. I was living in Europe on the continent in Austria, and so programmed Commodores, Apples, Sinclairs. And, back then it was sort of the early days of computers, and it was sort of normal for one person to build a competitive game or a utility. So I just sort of fell into, building things that other people used and starting them from scratch myself. And computers were really a hobby for me, when I was young.
Wow, you're just talking about my childhood there too. I mean, that was the era of the bedroom developer creating those games that we all remember so affectionately. It was a very special time, wasn't it?
It really was. And, it's funny because, now computers are like really pervasive and in some ways like cool. And back then you were sort of an outsider geek if you programmed computers, and there was like a club of us that did it. And I do look back on it very, very fondly,
And here in 2020, of course, what is the new way of digital business as a result of these ongoing stay-at-home orders? What kind of changes are you seeing? Because it's quite a contrast, isn't it, from that bedroom developer days to what we're seeing now?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I read something yesterday, actually, which really struck me, which is, the stay at home really is only possible because of technology. And, never, I think, before ever in modern history have we not had children go to school. And it's only possible now because of remote learning capabilities. So in some ways, the fact that there is a digital technology, broadband in a lot of homes, and I think this will just continue to accelerate the adoption of technology into the home. So it's quite fascinating what's happened. And definitely on the business side, the set of tools that enable workers to be remote have really accelerated. And, I've done a lot of remote work over the years and distributed teams. InCountry is a global team. We have offices in places like Minsk and Sydney and Singapore and Dubai, UAE, Abu Dhabi. And it's, remote work doesn't actually work for everyone, so it's interesting. And it's a lifestyle in some ways. People require sort of self-motivation. A lot of people, really need to go somewhere and be around other people. And then some people do have that need, and then they have a life adjustment. They have kids, they want to be at home more, and they make the adaptation to remote work. So I think it can be challenging. I do think technology can really help, though. Help people stay connected and be part of a team, see each other live. I think it can help bridge that divide.
I completely agree with you. What I find really fascinating is this technology to keep people connected has been there for quite a few years now. But of course, 6 months ago, there was a lot of bosses reluctant to allow their staff to work remotely, because if they let one person do it, then they'd have to let every person or every team do it. And things like video conferencing, it was a few months ago, nobody was interested in using it. All felt a little bit awkward. And then all of a sudden, even grandparents are using it every day to speak to their grandkids every day. But I mean, from your point of view, how can businesses adapt and thrive and survive in this period of uncertainty by leveraging technology and remote working, etc.? Yeah,
I mean, look, it's very interesting because in some ways there's been this massive acceleration of existing trends. And, we operate a global business. We work primarily with financial services companies, healthcare providers, and especially rest of the world. There was definitely, a perspective that if you were a bank, you could say, well, come on down to the branch, and then all of a sudden everybody realized, wow, we need to get the latest cloud software and let people do this online. So for a lot of businesses, there's been an acceleration to online, and you sort of see this in the stock market, and the SaaS companies, have all kind of grown through, one of the craziest things that's ever happened in the modern era. And you go, wow, why would these companies grow? And it's because as the brick and mortar infrastructure falls by the wayside, companies have to invest in online, and then they want the latest cloud software.
And I'm curious, what is it you think CEOs and founders should be doing right now? And what kind of things do you think can wait? Because I think so many are spending lots of plates and trying to adjust their priorities, make data-driven decisions, and try and come out of this lockdown period and bounce straight back. But what do you think they should be focusing on right now?
Well, look, if you're running a business and you have people that you're responsible for, one thing to really recognize is, especially in, our joke is, these uncertain times, you really can't predict what's going to happen. So you have to maintain a little bit of flexibility. This can be hard for people that like to have their 3-month plan, their 6-month plan, their 12-month plan. Nobody right now has a 12-month plan, and you have to let go of it. And you have to have optionality so that you can react to the shifts in the market. And that could be very uncomfortable, And the one thing that I think is really important is always go to the source data yourself. Don't take other people's opinions or whatever, right? Even experts. You have to go look at the data yourself and draw your own conclusions, or get 5 different viewpoints to get a sense of what's happening. And that's sort of the nature of information delivery nowadays. It's very, very difficult sometimes to really find out what's actually happening.
And as someone that has won 6 enterprises there, or even sold them as well, I'm curious. You've seen a lot of changes. You've seen the dot-com bubble and so many different trends throughout the years. What are the realities of running a startup during a recession?
It's hard. And the thing is, like, with this company, we definitely had a global outlook, and we saw coronavirus hitting in February, late January, because our entire Asia business imploded, and it was half of our pipeline. So we made some smaller cuts in early February and just stopped spending money, and just told everybody, hey, look, we're here with you, and we're going to get through this. And the most important thing is just to have this perspective that it's a team. You have to support the team members that are going to struggle, and people will. It was hard with folks that had children at home, that they had to educate. So we had to accommodate sort of looser schedules, and just, be very clear with your internal team of what's going on. And then also be, very clear-minded about what's going on in the market. What sectors are growing, what sectors are contracting. And a lot of it is to just see things for how they are and not for how you want them to be or how you wish them to be. And that can be hard for people.
And I am conscious that a lot of people listening to our conversation today may not be hearing about InCountry for the very first time. So InCountry is a data residency as a service. So can you tell me a little bit more about your mission to enable data compliance for international businesses and the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers?
Well, it's interesting because this has been a trend that's been going on for a while, but a lot of folks aren't aware of it. And it's another one of these where people just sort of thought it would go away on its own. And really what's happening is, imagine a McDonald's enters another country, let's say Sri Lanka, and they say, okay, we're going to set up restaurants here. Well, they're subject to restaurant regulations and laws, labor laws, revenue recognition laws, taxes, how the front door opens, food preparation laws, So for international business operating in a variety of countries, they're already very well accustomed to having to follow a bunch of regulations in each country that really touched almost every aspect of their business, except for one. If they wanted to do a buy 9 Big Macs, get one for free promotion, they could do whatever they wanted with the data up until about 2 years ago, right? And countries increasingly are starting to regulate that aspect as well. So this thing about this open internet and free data flows, worldwide, are rapidly coming to an end. And, there's GDPR, there's a bunch of laws, and the ones for banking data and health data and payment data are much more stringent than, what happens to your email address. And this is what we facilitate for businesses. So we store the data in the actual country, which is something a lot of countries are starting to insist on. So I don't know if you know, but the EU, European Court of Justice, invalidated Privacy Shield, which enabled U.S. companies to store EU citizen data. Is gone now. So now every U.S. company has to store EU data in the EU. Same with China, same with Russia, UAE for health data, Saudi Arabia for financial services data, South Korea for health data. So a lot of this data has to be stored in its country of origin. And the reason is the countries are saying we're managing the data for our citizens under our jurisprudence and our jurisdiction. So this is increasingly a big problem, and it's one we're solving for businesses. So we have facilities and partnerships in 90 countries that let you use, let's say, Salesforce or ServiceNow or modern cloud software for banking like Mambu or Thought Machine, and be able to, run all this type of software, but still be able to be compliant in each of these countries by storing data and managing it subject to their rules.
There really just seemed to be a storm brewing here, doesn't there, with the management of data, especially like you mentioned there, where it's got to be managed in each particular country, because it almost feels like a few years ago, a lot of people were saying that data is the new oil, but now what was largely considered to be the greatest asset could quickly become the biggest liability if it's not managed. Is that right?
It's very true. And a lot of us went through this with credit cards. So there's a standard called PCI DSS that added a lot of stringent controls on how payment information was handled. And one of the end results of that is a lot of companies said, we're no longer storing credit card data, right? They would work with a vendor or a transaction processor like a Stripe, and they would never even see your credit card number, right? And you even see this sometimes, like if you call Singapore Airlines, and I guess that doesn't happen much nowadays, but when you did, a lot of places you call and they want your phone number, your credit card number, you no longer read it out loud to the agent. You type it in, to a separate system that airline doesn't even run, because they don't want anything to do with your credit card number. And pretty soon, a lot of bits of data are going to be treated like that. They're going to have so much liability around them, especially globally, that, a company that's, that their business is selling shoes or selling airline tickets, they really don't want to deal with storing your data, and managing it in all of these countries.
I think there's going to be so many more big changes throughout the next 18 months. But I've got to ask, I mean, what excites you about the road ahead for InCountry? Because it feels like you're in the right place at the right time for these kind of changes.
Well, I have two passions, and my two passions are technology, particularly, distributed infrastructure. And we're very fortunate with InCountry. That's a fascinating technical project. And it's hard to do, large scale cloud infrastructure now as a startup because there are these very, very large players out there. And you have to kind of find the crumbs that fall out of a Microsoft or Amazon's or Google's mouth, which their little crumb that falls out of their mouth that you can grab could be $1 billion business, which is kind of funny, right? But you can't do what they're doing. That's for sure. And then my other passion is geopolitics, because I grew up overseas. My father worked for the UN. My parents are both from different nationalities. And so like one of the themes, that I, predicted, behind this company was sort of a deglobalization trend, which, 4 or 5 years ago when I had this idea, people thought was absolutely bonkers. But, you can see it happening in real time with Brexit and, even like, the US is now telling Chinese companies they have to store data in the US. So, you can definitely see a lot of different things happening. And, and everyone's looking at things like a ventilator and going, why can't we build one of these in our own country? Right. So, and I don't know if it's necessarily that bad. I think, 20, 30 years from now, people are going to be like, telling their children, when I was young, they used to pull all the energy out of the ground, far away and put it in a big boat and sail that boat halfway around the world and then unload the energy into trucks and take them to petrol stations. And then people would fill up their car with energy, right? Or every washing machine in the world was made in one place and put on boats and shipped around. So in some ways, everything we've done that we know, might have just been transitory.
That's such a great story. It really highlights, we're laughing, but it's so true. Oh, man. But I'm conscious we've covered a fair bit of ground here in only 25 minutes. So for anyone that would like to find out more information about how you can help or the work that you're doing or even contact your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Oh, please come visit us at InCountry.com or on Twitter at InCountry Inc. And then I'm at Peter, Yared, on Twitter as well. And love to hear from you or any thoughts you might have.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. I mean, as the founder who has sold 6 enterprise infrastructure companies and just hearing about your career there and those bedroom developer days, I've got so many fond memories of that time. But I think more than ever, it's what you're building for the future here that's incredibly important, and helping businesses stay compliant with global data regulations and allowing them to store things. It's not just when we say data, it's profile, employee, healthcare, transaction and payment data in the country of residence. And as any business owner will tell you, that is no simple task. Well, it isn't, but you seem to be making it much simpler. So a big thank you for taking the time to come on here and share that story with me today.
Thanks so much, Neil. Really appreciated your time and questions.
Wow, 7 times founder with more than $500 million in exit. I think it's fair to say that Peter knows what he's talking about. And one of the things that I've learned recording over 1,300 interviews is I suspect that if you had sold 6 companies and took 6 of them to exit, you would be currently lying on a beach drinking cocktails, sharing war stories with other people. But believe it or not, after 3 weeks, that would get incredibly boring. And we all need a reason to jump out of bed in the morning. And when talking with Peter, you sense that passion with InCountry, that world's first data residency-as-a-service platform. Because that is the important stuff. That's what makes you happy and makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, having that sense of purpose. But don't misunderstand me. That doesn't mean I don't dream of drinking cocktails on a beach for a few weeks. Everything in moderation, including moderation, I say, but that's a different topic entirely. So please, over to you. Please share your thoughts, experiences, insights, questions, whatever it may be. Simply email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, Instagram, LinkedIn is Neil C. Hughes too, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you want to work with me or just want to access those 1,300 podcast interviews that we've accumulated over the last 5 years. But I got myself a little bit too excited, so I'm going to go for a nice lie down now. And I'll return tomorrow with another guest where we'll explore how technology is transforming their business, industry, or indeed world. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.